So today we're going to learn flow, song arrangement, which is going to be good because this is one of the main things that we have to learn when we're learning, how to make professional and advanced bass music or EDM. One thing that's important is you have to listen to a lot of music. You need to be able to know what rhythms are in your soul, because you're going to get to a point where you're just going to have to feel it. A lot of this that I'm writing is coming from what I imagined beforehand, and the rhythms that are in my soul are from my favorite songs, from my favorite build-ups and my favorite breakdowns and drops and fake drops and different rhythms. So we're going to get into all that. I'm going to show you 2 projects, one regular and then one advanced, the Stone Level project, and we're going to break down the techniques and tricks that all the producers use so that we can get good flow, good song arrangement, and this will help you create really good drops. So let's get into it, one for the one time. We're gonna go over this too. Oh yes, and guess what? This song is going to be on my SoundCloud as soon as this video drops, so go get it, link in the description. Let's get on to this. I'm going to show you guys the different sections here. So first thing I want to go over is layering is the most important thing here. So when you're making these drops, you're thinking of your layers, right? You're thinking of what's going to be your main sound, what sounds are going to be in the background, and then you can start thinking about what sounds are going to be to the left side and the right side, because you're going to fill out, your stereo field. And that's important. So you're going to think in those aspects when you're writing your drop. With my kicks and my claps, which are the drums here, they're pretty loud. They're as loud as I can get them, but I still make sure they're clean. The side chain is doing a lot of mixing. This is making sure everything's clean. And then we start writing the drop. Let's say we have all of our sound design down and we want to start writing it out. Now, me personally, I'm sound designing on the go, and I'm duplicating patches to make different sounds. But in this, we have a simple drop. So first off, there's this fake drop, as you hear. Then it starts. As you hear, right before it starts, there's a vocal. Really good vocal layered, so it's really loud. And when I layer it, there's like a mono layer, so it's in the middle. There's a regular layer that was just pretty stereo, and then I made it even a wider layer as well, just to make it thick. So you see here, you build up. So lately, nowadays, we do these fake drops all the time in bass music. So you have your pre-drop, and then you build more tension and more energy with this fake drop. And that's essentially what it's doing right here. So like, and the drop hits harder because of that. So remember, fake drops are going to be your best friend. And it's happening a lot. In our next project, you're going to see there's a lot of fake drops. So as soon as the fake drop has ended and you hear that vocal, that brings us into the next phrase, which is the start of the drop. That's going to be a pattern. You're going to have these little fills right before the next phrase. So we get into the start. So at the start, always you're going to have something on the downbeat, something nice and big, and then something that goes right after. And then the drop would actually start right there. If you see here, we have a lot of layers. We have a wide layer. For the wide, we have the original bass from the Maruada song. doing a lot, of course. And I wanted that because when you use that bass from the original track, it flowed really well for this remix. And then we have the kick, which is doing the side chain. And then the snare, big snare, goes right after with the kick, side chain going, rides going. And then we have the first main sound. So depending on your song, you can have your main sound be a sustain, really long, or maybe just like a quarter note bass, like rah, 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 rah. You could figure out your favorite rhythm for the main sound. But for this song, I did a sustain. Doesn't always have to be like that, but you want to pick a main lead, basically. So with mine, that's my main lead. But as you see, there's a lot of layers. Basically the same sound, but different types. 1, 2, and then we have like a high-pitched ringing. The different layers, you combine them together. You want to layer fat for your main lead sounds, right? But then background sounds, you're not going to layer as much because they're not going to be as loud. Now for mixing purposes, I automated the on and off so that we can make a cool rhythm with our main sustain. So you listen here. You can barely tell because I basically have different sounds going on in these sections. And that just adds more rhythm, adds more flow. If you go to the sub, you'll see it's just pumping. Sub is going to be playing the same note as the lead. And this space right here, this is like a little fill section, but instead of a fill, we have like a cool alarm sound, belly sound, with lots of reverb and an amp. So I'll be just listening, and if I think the lead is playing too much, I'm going to delete a certain section right before the phrase, and then we'll put in a different sound. So as you see, this is, as you see, from the drop 1 to the sustain, we basically split it in half and we make each section different. So from 35 to 37, it sounds like something. And then from here, it sounds like something. So when you're making the song, you want to make sure every phrase sounds different so the listener doesn't get bored. And then you also can use hi-hats like this to just move along the sound. And you can add different percussions in different sections to add more flavor. Cool. So if you see here, when the drop starts, we have a sustain that's going, but I'm turning it off and on and adding different basses. So it's like boom, 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 boom. So it's kind of like a different flow, right? But then as soon as this sustain starts, it's more just pumping you with the sustain and not turning off and on as much. In these different sections, if you hear, they sound different because I'm automating different parameters to make them sound different. As you're going, you don't want to make the sustain the same. You can automate like the filter knobs in Serum or a frequency shifter and create different tones so that you can actually get variations. Because once again, you don't want to keep giving the listener the same thing. They're going to get bored. Even this is not varied enough. The next project I'm going to show you will be the real deal. But if you see, during the sustain, I still have extra basses in the background, just to add extra rhythm and a flow. Now, when we're halfway through, we do another intro downbeat. So, but I add little 2 lasers, and this is different from the beginning of the song. So you start adding variation, add different sounds in the next fills. I chopped up the sustain And then I added new basses in the sections where I chopped up the sustain. I even automated left and right, so it's going from left to right ear. When you chop up and add space, it adds more flow and more rhythm and makes you want to bounce even more. And mixing that with the sustains is really what you want to be doing throughout each section, like you see here as marked. And watch how this flows to the next section. So we basically are doing like the same thing over and over, but just switching it up, adding different sounds throughout so that it sounds different in each section. You want each phrase to sound unique. That's basically the goal. And if you see here, another downbeat, I resampled like a cool sound. And then we just bring you back to the sustain. Before we get into that second build, I want you to keep in mind that there's a chug bass going on in the background on the offbeat to add more rhythm. Listen. And that offbeat is basically where we hit our head, you know what I'm saying? See, we have more basses, and these are on the downbeat this time, so it's adding more pump on the downbeat. So we have a down and offbeat, as you see here. See, these are just in the background, and that's adding a lot of rhythm, a lot of flow, and you want to do this basically in every song, in most songs, you know. I mean, that's the point of this. You don't want to sound like others, so you use these tricks and you make your own music. Make different music because that's what's going to get you heard. If it sounds like nothing that you've heard before, that's what you want. But it has to sound good too. So then as you see here, we if you count this is 16 bars going into this, right? You want to write your drop in either 16 or 32 bars. I usually stick to 32 bars, but this is 16. So because it was 16, I added this like extra build in the middle, and then we introduced another 8 bars of drop so that we can, you know, get funky. And that's a good thing to do, and then we could break it down after that. But if you look at the second drop, I make it a little different by adding a different bass, and now instead of more sustain, we're doing like a quarter note bass, like rah rah rah. But first, we did a fake drop. If you see, I chopped up this bass even more, the original bass, and I resampled it. I did like this. It's going like triplet. Cool. So right, let's listen. So it builds up. There's a pre-drop and then a fake drop to add more tension. And then we bring in the 8 bars of regular drop. Listen here. Round 2. Sick. So we have this, a sustain, we have this, another sustain, and then we have this bass, which is layered. Like a quarter note bass layered. And we're just adding a different, you know, flow during this section. And you see we cut open space, right? See the phrase ends, we do some space, we add a vocal. The vocal sounds really loud because it's by itself, and you want to introduce silence a lot, remember. automate on and off to make sure there's no reverb tails or delay tails. Sick. All right, so that is the first project that I wanted to show you guys, and that's an important project because it's a remix. You want to be able to incorporate the original sounds into your remix, and you want to be able to still have good flow. Can't always be the same. Remember, variation. That's one of the most important things here. So this is the most important project because we remade Stone Level's remix, and I recommend that you guys start putting reference tracks in just like this, looking how they remade these songs. Make sure you line up the BPM so it's on grid and it looks normal to you. And you'll see the tricks that they do, and it's amazing. When you do it, you can just Command E, separate everything, separate the fills and stuff, and it'll look easy. And you can even add locators if you want. But check out these fake drops and extra builds. So imagine the build up, right? And then this is the start of the drop. Oh my God. This is extreme flow. This is where we want to be. And honestly, after preparing this for this video, I realized that I need to start using more reference tracks and recreating the rhythms and flows that they're using and try to do this. That's what Ahi did, and Ahi's playing at the festivals right now. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to go over is the beginning. So if you listen, this is a fake drop, which means that the drop was supposed to happen, but instead of the fake drop, we're just doing the bass, no sub, and we're building it up, adding more tension. But in this song that he did, he actually added a riser, which adds even more tension. But remember, the downbeat, every downbeat, you got to have a cool sound, and this is no different. So downbeat, start hitting you with the bass, and that's call and response. Call and response is what you want to think about constantly. So call, response, call again. Let's do it. Cool. So you see the bass was basically going faster in the fake drop, and then in the regular drop you kind of slow it down. But you add the sustain to start adding extra craziness. So you layer your quarter notes dot 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 with the sustain, and then that's just awesome. So you really want to experiment with different layers. So instead of quarter note, you can either do like triplet quarter note or eighth note, triplet eighth note, and layer different basses like that. Mess with different tones, and then you add in different sections. So listen. Now throughout the phrase, we're adding even more fills. So midway through this phrase, we have it silenced, and then we add like a yoy bass. And that's what you want to do a lot. You want to keep adding the silences, add your fills, and make it cool. So remember, the beginning of this phrase would be the downbeat, then the vocal. So midway through, you hear the yoy bass, and then at the end of the phrase, we have another bass, like a Reese bass. And then we start the next phrase, and then it's another like section where there's no sub, and it's adding even more tension. And this song is special because most songs don't do this, but this song adds a lot of these no sub fills. You see here, this is the bass clef washout, and you automate that to bring it in even more. So you're like whooshing into the next phrase. You could do that with reverb throwers as well, like automating the the dry and wet. And if you notice here, this section sounds different than this section. They're different basses. So you don't always want to use the same basses for the whole section. You could duplicate them, make it sound a little bit different, layer them with other basses, and have each phrase sound different. Cool. So as you hear in this second phrase, still the same fills, the yoy bass fill, the Reese bass fill at the end of the phrase. But when we get halfway, we make it sound different. So we add the downbeat. But what we do here is we just get one of the basses, and then we add a delay. So we automate a delay on and off only in this section. Right? And then you add a fourth delay to make it sound like this. Cool. And then while that plays, we are also having this come in, this bass. If you hear it like filtered in, because there's a filter on in this section only, and it filters in the dry and wet like this. So those are more tricks that you can do to, add those dynamics and add those really cool fills to these phrases, because, these auto filters sound so clean. So remember, after the auto filter section, another downbeat, a cool downbeat. This is the Subshot 3.0. So in his original song, he had a regular shot like this, but only in the halfway point, he wanted to add a different downbeat that sounds even dirtier. So you add a little spice flavor like that to make the listener will enjoy that. They'll appreciate it, especially if they're a producer. Then this one sounds a little bit different. And in this phrase, you see this sub is like chopped up. In all these phrases, the sub is not chopped up. It's like all sustained. But we are making this section different. And then you add new fills. So like in this section, we add some stumps. We add some toms. And then when we get to the last phrase, it's another no sub fill. So there's no sub playing, it's just the basses playing, and then we introduce the next section. So all these sounds are pretty much the same throughout the song. We're just moving them in different sections, layering it in different ways. Yeah, and that's it. That's song arrangement, that's flow. We're going to have a lot more videos on this subject because it's so important, and every song's different. But what's most important is you won't know flow and song arrangement until you listen to enough songs that you love, where you just know rhythm and flow, right? And if you're having trouble, bring in those reference tracks. Look at how they layer their kicks and the buildups and the drops. Look at how they layer the snares, where they're hitting timing wise. You just want to make sure that rhythm and flow comes naturally, because you can't really just get into Ableton and expect to know it. It's kind of something that comes from the heart. Think of a drummer, they practice rhythm, you keep practicing rhythm, and listen to music, listen to different genres to get to know all the rhythms that you want to keep making in the future. Otherwise, you guys have been great. You guys have been dope. Stay fresh, keep it real. Let me know in the comments what videos you want next. Otherwise, you know, like, subscribe, hit me up on my Patreon, hit me up on my Discord. Peace out.
Go.